Good morning, dignitaries, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India, the Institute of Mass Communications and Broadcast Engineering Consultants India Limited, I'd like to welcome you all to the 15th Asia Media Summit of the Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development 2018. The theme is Telling Our Stories, Asia and More.
You have the world of cinema led by Bollywood. They tell a story of the core values enshrined in our culture, in our constitution. The happy ending, with rare exceptions, is a phenomena that stays as the cornerstone of Bollywood's tryst with commercial and creative success. We have a tradition of communication as well. The earliest resemblance mentioned in our scriptures and in our classical texts to a journalist is that of Narad Muni, who travels the three worlds to communicate a story from the heavens to the netherworld and then to the universe at large. You have a resemblance of a live television telecast or a webcast, what you can call, in Sanjaya telling the story of the Mahabharata to a blind Dhritarashtra live from the battlefield of Kurukshetra. That is the communication tradition we have inherited in this country. Cut to modern day era communication. You look at WhatsApp, which is very popular with Indians. Its success in India lies in its ability to bind physically scattered families. The groups are fundamentally populated by family tales, anecdotes of good, bad, and ugly times spent together. An old picture that tells the story of togetherness and brings the groups alive. And our stories are not just about the compartmentalized, the good and the evil. You have shades of good even in the evil and shades of evil even in the good. So you have a Ravana who is venerated as a great learned person, the character of Ravana. That is the beauty of our stories, which is assimilating in nature, which is inclusive in nature. Here, even the divine are not immune to frailties. Friends, what is interesting is that social media platforms like FB, Facebook, and Twitter have hope and negativity in good measure. We ultimately need to create a perfect ensemble between our traditional means of storytelling while adapting new age platforms. What is the most talked about Asian story? If you are an eternal optimist, you will continually look forward to the Asian century. And if you happen to be on the other side of the table, you would argue that all talk about Asia is the sheer dominance by a couple of nations, generally at each other's throat. The truth, unfortunately, is that the Asian narrative has been a victim of a straight-jacketed editorial with screaming headlines of conflict rather than collaboration. It is media's failure in focusing excessively on the political class driving the destinies of member nations without ever looking at convergence at people-to-people level driven by technology, culture, and society. What binds us is not a piece of land, but a sentiment that is distinct and prides itself on a value system that is typically Asian. The acceptance with which, for instance, Indian consumers have embraced, say, cheaper Chinese goods shows a common aspiration of a cost-conscious Asian. Now, this is the Asian value where we focus a lot on savings. We believe in spending, but at the same time, we have survived because of our tendency to save. The world intelligentsia is celebrating the Asian rise and its ability to plot the global future. There is a view that globalization has reincarnated in Asia. Earlier, it was a trade-based and Western-led. Today, globalization is being driven by digital technology and is increasingly led by India, China, and other emerging economies. The truth is that the three of the world's four largest economies are in Asia today. Estimates say that by 2025, 2/3 of the world's population will live in Asia, compared with just over a tenth in the West. Asia's economic transformation is reshaping the global distribution of power, changing the way the region and indeed the world work politically and strategically. But the million-dollar rupee-rupaya question is, does this narrative reflect in the mainstream media? How does one mitigate the challenge? How does one change the narrative? The Asian media has to reset its framework in understanding and proclaiming that narrative. Technology is the breakthrough. Storytelling has to move from non-traditional formats to traditional formats. Stories of context, collaboration, convergence, and creativity have to seed through the social media to penetrate the mainstream media. This is one paradigm where we should be willingly accepting the ascendancy of the social media. There has to be a mass movement to identify citizen journalists obsessed by the need to tell borderless stories. This in turn will lead to creation of communities that seed, amplify, and mass distribute stories across social media. For instance, stories of transformation brought about by borderless medicines. You have a lot of Pakistani patients seeking treatment in India. And these stories need to be documented without being cast in that typical narrative. These are stories of people having hope and trust, people they can relate to. It is time to tell all these stories afresh from a purely human perspective. The story nomenclature also has to be not about promoting a block or a particular geography, but about the power of people residing in these countries. Given the negativity all around, positive stories that promote honesty and integrity, innovation, ingenuity are the ones that need immediate attention. We need urgently to create a platform where all such stories can reside. This has to be a people's initiative. The Asian Media Summit is a great initiative and accords official sanction to any such positive move. It is time media schools across the region collaborate to usher in the desired sentiment. We can use this opportunity to spread a word here amongst the student community to start collaborating across the borders. The Indian Institute of Mass Communication can take the lead in staging a digital platform where not only do we train media careerists from the region in building the core skill set, but most importantly, work for a mindset change and evolve a media product accordingly. I wish to mention here that since 1969, we have trained about 1,600 journalists from 128 countries from across the globe. Friends, to begin with, let us look at borderless communities, because the youth form a formidable bloc. It is time to tell our stories, the Asian stories, through our perspective, through our prism, not through the Western prism. We have our own economic strengths. We have our own traditional strengths, but let us accept it that even today, the information order is not being seen through the Asian prism or the Asian perspective. I remember I used to be a journalist with the Press Trust of India. We used to have an organization of Asian news agencies, OANA. I think that there is need to tell our stories through Asian news agencies. There is need to tell our stories through Asian television channels. There is need to tell our stories through Asian radio stations. So, these consumption preoccupations have a cultural and societal context, and for the vast parts of the Asian region, there is uniformity. Spending, despite massive globalization push, is a pastime, but not at the cost of saving. That is intrinsic to the Asian DNA. In the macro sense, therefore, the story has to be told in the Asian context, for its context, culture, and creativity. Friends, we often say that 21st century is the Asian century. If we have to make it the Asian century, then we will have to tell the whole world about Asian stories, about Asia's success stories, about Asia's development challenges, about Asia's unity, Asia's identity. These are the stories that need to be told and retold. I'm confident that the deliberations at this conference would contribute immensely in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suresh ji, for a very insightful presentation.